What if I told you that the 4th of July, the day millions celebrate as the birth of America, isn't what it seems? That behind every firework lies a forgotten scream, every anthem hides a curse, and that the men who birthed this nation were haunted until their final breath? This isn't a patriotic tale. It's a ghost story, a psychological scar dressed up as liberty. In this episode, we dive deep into the entire history of July 4th, from the smoke-filled rooms of revolution to the eerie deaths of its creators, from the hidden truths in America's founding document to the rituals, riots, and shadows that still echo today. Stay to the end, because the 4th of July isn't just history, it may be a pattern repeating itself. Before America existed, there was tension, colonial tension. The 13 colonies weren't united. They were divided by class, economy, religion. But one thing connected them all: resentment. Resentment toward a king across an ocean, taxing their tea, their stamps, their dignity. In 1775, war broke out. But independence? That was a radical word. Only a few dared whisper it. And then came July 2nd, 1776. The Second Continental Congress voted in favor of separation from Britain. But the real day, the day ink met parchment and the final words were chosen, was July 4th. And what were those words? We hold these truths to be self-evident. But truth was never that simple. The Declaration of Independence wasn't just a document. It was a death wish. 56 men signed their names knowing they might be hunted, executed, or ruined. And many were. 5 were captured and tortured. 9 died of wounds from war. 12 had their homes burned to ash. Carter Braxton, once wealthy, watched his ships sink into ruin. Thomas Nelson ordered cannons to fire on his own house because British troops were stationed there. These were not abstract sacrifices. These were lives unraveled. And yet, we celebrate it with sparklers? What? Here's a secret they won't teach you in school. No one celebrated July 4th at first. Not for years. It was too raw, too uncertain. The war dragged on until 1783. America was free, but fragile. There was no unity, no shared culture, no anthem. George Washington was president, but feared a coup. Even he saw the dangers of unchecked patriotism. Independence was still a wound, not a holiday. The 4th passed like any other day for decades. It was not made a federal holiday until 1870, nearly a century later. Why did it take so long? Because something about it was too painful to remember. On July 4th, 1826, exactly 50 years after the signing of the Declaration, 2 of its greatest authors died. John Adams, Thomas Jefferson. They died hours apart, on the same day, the same date, the same anniversary. Jefferson passed early in the day at Monticello. Adams, unaware, died later in Massachusetts. His final words? Jefferson lives. But Jefferson was already gone. Was it coincidence? Or something more deliberate? Some historians speculate that both men, old and ill, held on out of sheer will, waiting to die on the day they helped create. Others whisper of a pact, a ritual, a poetic symmetry that feels more like fate than fact. But that's not the end. James Monroe, the 5th president, also died on July 4th. That makes 3 presidents, all founding fathers, who died on Independence Day. What are the odds? 1 might be luck. 2 strange. 3? That begins to look like a pattern. Some scholars call it eerie but unavoidable. Others call it a curse. A kind of blood sacrifice the nation unknowingly demanded year after year. And if these were the sacrifices, who benefited? By the mid-1800s, July 4th finally became a public event. Parades, music, flags. But these weren't just for joy, they were tools of control. During the Civil War, Lincoln promoted 4th of July celebrations to hold the Union together. Post-war, it became a day to reclaim unity, a shared myth, a national lullaby. But even then, some people refused to celebrate. Native Americans called it a day of mourning. Enslaved Black Americans asked, "What freedom?" Frederick Douglass gave his famous speech in 1852, asking, "What to the slave is your 4th of July?" The answer? Nothing. A day of mockery. A lie wrapped in a flag. Fireworks didn't appear until decades later, and when they did, they weren't harmless fun. In early America, firework displays mimicked warfare. Gunpowder, muskets, mortars, the sounds of revolution replayed each year. Every explosion a reminder, this freedom was bought with violence. But as the decades passed, people forgot. The sound became celebration. The violence became joy. The ritual of remembering became the ritual of forgetting. Isn't that how all ghosts survive? Every year the fireworks echo, and somewhere, so do the screams. The 4th of July is not just the birthday of a nation. It's a grave marker, a warning dressed in glitter. And if history repeats itself, if empires rise and fall in cycles, then what's coming next? We celebrate the 4th, but we never stop being at war. In part 2, we'll go deeper into the occult origins of revolution. Why July 4th aligns with ancient solstice rituals, how secret societies shaped America's symbols, and what prophecies were buried in its founding myths. Subscribe now, before the next celebration becomes the last one.